look, if you're God and you're writing your commandments, wouldn't you write, don't own other people as property? And if you didn't, if that was an oversight, would you ever encourage them to write down that, as a matter of fact, you can and should, and here's who you should enslave, and here's how much you should pay for them? I mean, the Bible doesn't just, like, overlook this. It gets it exactly backward. And if your argument is that it was necessary for them to enslave other people on the planet because, I don't know, they were immoral and didn't like God, then that's kind of a weak God, first of all, and an immoral one. Because if you're going to give people the free will that you seem to think is necessary here, and then you want to extract punishment for them exercising it in the wrong way, how free is that?
Yeah, I think you have a point to an extent, I would say, because I feel like we've reached into the whole idea of free will. To me personally, is a very mysterious subject, and to try to say that God, you can't just throw out there, in my opinion, that God, gave them free will, and then He knew what they were going to do, and then because of that, He comes back and has to punish them. I just don't think we can wrap our minds around that process.
Well, I think we can a little bit. I think we can a little bit. So, for example,
to an extent.
So, for example, Jonathan, do you believe that God created everything?
I believe He created every natural thing. Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that He had decisions about what kind of universe He could create, or was this the only one?
I'm sure He had decisions. Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe that He has foreknowledge of the future, perfect foreknowledge, knows what's going to happen later on?
Yes, I'd say yes.
Okay, then under that model, those three things, you cannot also claim that we have free will, because that specific set of three items, a deity who created the universe, knowing what would happen, and having choices of other universes to potentially create, that means that God necessarily created this universe and specifically chose the universe in which this set of decisions would be made. He specifically chose the universe in which I would end up as an atheist, or at least be an atheist at my current age. Who knows where I'll end up? And every single decision. There's no free will in that model.
Yeah, as I said, I don't feel like I have a definition for free will. I do believe that.
I don't think there's a definition of free will that matches any. You can twist it up pretty good, and you're not going to get over that.
Yeah, on the subject, I can't say much about it. But from what I understand, I really do agree with those who would say, slavery is inconsistent with who God is.
How can they possibly say that? If the only thing that we know of what God reportedly is this book that describes His character and portrays what His commandments are, what His wishes are, how could anybody possibly claim that this is inconsistent? I mean, people try to claim that, also try to claim that, that He's just a loving God. Well, the entire Old Testament is pretty much a comedy of God's errors and anger. He creates two people, sticks them in a garden in the most absurd situations, says, don't eat from this tree. I realize that he was probably a first-time parent in this scenario, but I think even the dumbest parent would know what was going to happen there. And so He has to punish them and exile them. And then the whole world goes to hell shortly thereafter. And so He picks out, the most righteous man in his family and decides to build a ridiculous boat, which isn't seaworthy and couldn't hold all the animals. And then He's going to flood and kill everything except for this family, at least if you go for a global flood, which we know scientifically just is absurd, and no other civilization seemed to notice this global flood. So it must have been a local flood, which doesn't actually solve the problem of sin. And then right after Noah, you've got a couple hundred years where they do this massive population growth, and they're building a Tower of Babel, which I don't know why a God would be even the slightest bit bothered. This was clearly the mindset of these ancient people, that God lived somewhere up in the sky, even though modern theologians say no, that's not it at all, because clearly we can travel to the moon. I don't know if we waved to God on the way past, and that fails and falls apart. And so then God decides, instead of trying to save everybody, He's just going to pick out His one favorite tribe tribe who happened to be enslaved, and I'm pretty sure they should have realized that there was a problem with slavery, and goes through this incredible scenario of, we're going to give all these plagues, and every time Pharaoh wants to actually let them go, God comes down and specifically hardens his heart so that he can show off a bit more. Oh, no, I want you to let him go, but I'm not going to let you make that. He violated Pharaoh's free will. It's explicitly there. Yeah, no. He hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he couldn't do it, gets all the plagues out of the way. Then these 3 million Jews, for which is no evidence that they were ever enslaved in Israel or in Egypt. There's no commingling of, and by the way, if they held hand to hand the number of Jews that were there, they could have stretched from Egypt to Canaan in the first place. They're led across, all these miracles and everything else. Miracles that would wow anybody living today. They get to Mount Ararat, Moses is gone for 40 days, and those guys say, screw that God, we'll make another one. This guy can't do anything right. And yet he specifically chose this universe where he knew he was going to have to keep failing and keep killing and keep failing and keep killing until he picked out his little special group and sent them around to keep failing and keep killing. And then there's this empty period, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to take human form, come down, sacrifice myself to act as a loophole for rules that I created that I can't circumvent. I mean, it is logically absurd.